Lieutenant Daniel Carter had never seen a city like this before. Towering crystal spires reached into the sky, glowing with soft blue light. The streets below were filled with alien life. Tall beings with silver skin, short ones with 4 arms, and even creatures that seemed to float instead of walk. This was Voltris Prime, the capital of the Sci-Fi Unity, one of the most powerful interstellar alliances in the galaxy. Daniel, dressed in his formal navy blue diplomatic uniform, stepped off the transport shuttle with careful precision. He wasn't a soldier, but he knew the importance of standing tall and looking confident. Earth's first invitation to Xalray Royal Festival was a historic moment. As humanity's representative, he had one job: make a good impression. A Xalray official, a tall figure with shimmering emerald skin and 4 luminous eyes, approached with a deep bow. "Lieutenant Carter, welcome to the grand celebration of unity," the official said in a calm, melodic voice. "I am Ambassador Zelkor, your guide for the evening. It is an honor to host a representative of Earth." "The honor is mine," Daniel replied smoothly, offering a polite nod. He had practiced Xalray customs for weeks, making sure to avoid any diplomatic mistakes. They walked through the grand hallways of the palace, where floating lanterns danced in the air, filling the space with golden light. The walls shimmered, shifting colors like a living painting. Around them, noble Xalray in elaborate silk-like robes moved gracefully, their deep voices humming in musical conversations. Daniel had studied their culture. The Xalray valued peace, diplomacy, and tradition above all else. Their ceremonies were long and complex, filled with rituals that strengthened bonds between their people. This event, the Festival of Unity, was held once every 50 years. It was a celebration of alliances, trust, and friendship between species, and humanity was now part of it. As they entered the grand hall, Daniel's breath caught for a moment. A massive table stretched across the room, covered in exotic dishes, some glowing, others shifting colors, and a few even floating slightly above the plates. At the center of the room, a large circular platform was surrounded by Xalray nobles, all whispering excitedly. "What is happening over there?" Daniel asked, nodding toward the platform. "The choosing ceremony," Ambassador Zelkor explained with a small smile. "It is one of our most sacred traditions. Tonight, Lady Virilan will select a worthy bondmate." Daniel raised an eyebrow. Bondmate? He wasn't sure what that meant, but he assumed it was important. At that moment, a musical chime rang through the hall, and the crowd grew silent. On the platform, a regal Xalray woman stepped forward. Her tall frame was covered in shimmering gold robes, her violet eyes glowing softly. This was Lady Virilan. She was one of the highest-ranking nobles in the Xalray Unity, known for her intelligence and unmatched combat skills. Daniel watched with polite curiosity as a group of high-ranking officials stood beside her, holding small crystal goblets filled with a shimmering silver liquid. One by one, they stepped forward, offering the drink to her. "She must accept a drink from one of the suitors," Zelkor explained. "The one she chooses will become her bondmate." Daniel nodded. It was fascinating to see such an ancient tradition unfold. Then, something unexpected happened. As Lady Virilan reached for a goblet, her gaze suddenly shifted toward Daniel. Their eyes met for a brief moment. And then, without hesitation, she walked toward him. The crowd murmured in confusion. Daniel blinked. Wait, was she coming to him? Before he could react, Lady Virilan offered him the goblet. The hall fell silent. Every noble, every ambassador, and every guest held their breath. Ambassador Zelkor's 4 eyes widened in shock. "Lieutenant Carter," he whispered urgently, "you must not refuse." Daniel swallowed. He didn't want to insult their traditions or cause an intergalactic incident. He hesitated for only a second before carefully accepting the goblet. With a slow diplomatic nod, he took a small sip. The liquid was cool and slightly sweet, leaving a tingling sensation on his tongue. The silence in the room lasted only a moment longer before the entire hall erupted in cheers. Daniel barely had time to react before Zelkor grabbed his arm. His usually calm voice now carried a hint of panic. "Lieutenant Carter," he said quickly, "do you realize what you just did?" Daniel frowned. "I was just following protocol." "Right." Zelkor shook his head. "You just accepted a marriage proposal." Daniel froze. "I what?" "You are now bonded to Lady Virelan. By Xal'rai law, you are her groom." The weight of those words hit Daniel like a meteor. He looked around, seeing nobles smiling, warriors nodding in approval, and Virelan watching him with unreadable eyes. This was not how he expected the night to go. And judging by the furious glare of a large Xal'rai warrior standing nearby, this was only the beginning of his problems. Daniel Carter stood frozen, the silver goblet still in his hand. The realization hit him like a shockwave. I just got married. The Xal'rai nobles continued to cheer, raising their own goblets in celebration. The air was filled with music, laughter, and glowing petals that floated down from the ceiling. The entire hall was rejoicing, except for Daniel. He turned to Ambassador Zelkor, hoping this was some kind of joke. "There has to be a mistake. I wasn't accepting a proposal. I was just being polite." Zelkor sighed, rubbing his forehead. "I feared this would happen. The choosing ceremony is an ancient tradition. By drinking from the goblet, you accepted Lady Virelan as your bondmate." Daniel's stomach twisted. "Okay, let's fix this. There has to be a way to." A loud thud interrupted him. Daniel turned just in time to see a massive Xal'rai warrior stomping toward him. The alien was over 7 feet tall, his emerald skin glowing faintly under the golden lights. His thick, armored robe barely contained his muscular frame. His violet eyes burned with fury. Zelkor whispered urgently, "That is Korvek, one of the strongest warriors in the Unity. He was expected to be chosen." Daniel had a very bad feeling about this. Korvek stopped inches from him, his sharp jaw clenched. "Human." His deep voice rumbled like distant thunder. "You have stolen what is mine." Daniel swallowed hard. Listen, I didn't steal anything. There's been a misunderstanding." Korvek's fists tightened. Lady Virelan was meant to choose a Xal'rai warrior, a true fighter, not a weak outsider. He turned to Virelan. "Why him?" Virelan, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. Her voice was strong and clear. "Because I saw something in him." Daniel blinked. "Wait, what?" The hall fell silent as she stepped forward, her golden robes flowing behind her. "He did not come here seeking power. He did not bow before me or beg for my favor. He came as an equal with respect and courage. That is why I chose him." The nobles murmured among themselves. Some nodded in agreement, while others looked confused. Korvek's eyes darkened. "Then let him prove it." Daniel tensed. Prove what exactly?" Korvek raised his arm, pointing at the center of the grand hall. "By the laws of the Xal'rai, I challenge you to a trial of honor." Daniel's heart stopped. Zelkor's expression became grim. "This is bad." Daniel forced himself to breathe. "Okay, can someone explain what this trial of honor is?" Zelkor sighed. "It is a duel. A fight to prove your worth as Lady Virelan's bondmate. If you refuse, you will be seen as a coward. That would bring great dishonor, not just to you, but to humanity itself." Daniel's throat went dry. A duel? Against a giant alien warrior. He looked at Korvek, who was practically radiating confidence. There was no way Daniel could win in a test of brute strength. He turned to Virelan. "Any chance you can just say, 'Oops, I made a mistake,' and we forget all this?" Virelan's gaze was unwavering. "I chose you. If you wish to refuse me, you must face the trial." Daniel sighed. "Of course." The nobles whispered in excitement as 2 guards stepped forward, preparing the dueling arena. The center of the hall shifted, the ground moving as a circular ring of polished stone rose from beneath the floor. Symbols of ancient warriors glowed along the edges. Daniel took a deep breath. All right. Think, Carter. You're not stronger. You're not faster. But you have one advantage. Humans fight dirty. As the rules were announced, no weapons, only skill and strength. Daniel sized up his opponent. Korvac was bigger, stronger, and had likely trained in combat his entire life. Daniel. He had spent most of his time in diplomacy, but he had basic military training. He knew how to think on his feet. The moment the duel started, Korvac charged like a war beast, his fists aiming straight for Daniel's chest. Daniel dodged at the last second, rolling to the side. Korvac's punch hit the ground, cracking the stone where Daniel had just been. Too slow, big guy. The crowd gasped at Daniel's quick reflexes. Korvac growled in frustration, turning sharply to strike again. This time, Daniel didn't move back. He moved forward. Using Korvac's own momentum, Daniel ducked low and swept his legs out from under him. The giant warrior stumbled, struggling to regain balance. The crowd gasped again. No one had ever seen a warrior lose his footing so easily. Daniel smirked. Problem. Big guy. Korvac roared in anger and lunged again, this time grabbing Daniel's arm and lifting him off the ground. Oh, bad move. Thinking fast, Daniel did what no Xal would ever expect. He headbutted Korvac in the face. The warrior staggered back, clearly stunned. Daniel landed on his feet, rubbing his forehead. Ow. That hurt. But it worked. Korvac, still reeling, fell to one knee. The nobles murmured in shock. A human had just brought down a Xal warrior in open combat. Viralen's eyes shone with something Daniel couldn't quite read. Zelkor stepped forward. The duel is over. Daniel Carter has proven his worth. Silence filled the room. Then, cheering. Daniel exhaled in relief. He had won. Somehow. But as he looked at Viralan, who was watching him with quiet intensity, he realized something. This wasn't over. Not even close. Daniel Carter couldn't believe it. He had actually won. The grand hall of the Xal Palace was still filled with shocked whispers. The nobles, the warriors, even the musicians, everyone had witnessed something impossible. A human, small compared to the Xal, had defeated Korvac in combat. Daniel was breathing hard, his muscles aching. Korvac was still on one knee, holding his head where Daniel had headbutted him. The Xal warrior had strength and experience, but Daniel had speed, tactics, and just a little human stubbornness. Ambassador Zelkor finally spoke, breaking the silence. By the rules of the Trial of Honor, Lieutenant Carter has proved his worth. The challenge is settled. The nobles began to applaud, some nodding in approval, others whispering in disbelief. Korvac slowly stood, his violet eyes burning with frustration. He took a deep breath, then did something unexpected. He bowed. You fought well, human, Korvac said, his deep voice firm but respectful. I do not agree with Lady Viralan's choice, but I will honor the trial's result. You have earned your place. Daniel didn't know how to respond. He had just accidentally defeated a warrior prince, and now the guy was showing him respect. This night kept getting stranger. Then, all attention turned to Lady Viralan. She stepped forward, her golden robes shimmering under the soft palace lights. Her expression was unreadable, her violet eyes locked on Daniel. He braced himself. He still wasn't sure what she really wanted. Viralan spoke, her voice clear and commanding. Lieutenant Carter, you have passed the trial. You stand as my chosen bondmate. The room grew silent again. Daniel felt a knot in his stomach. He had won the fight. But now he was facing the real problem. He couldn't actually go through with this. He couldn't just marry an alien noble. Taking a deep breath, Daniel stepped forward. Lady Viralan, I need to speak with you. In private. Viralan tilted her head slightly but nodded. She turned and led him away from the main hall, through a corridor lined with glowing blue stones. The murmurs of the nobles faded behind them. Inside a small chamber, the doors sealed shut with a soft hum. Daniel took a moment to collect his thoughts. He had to be careful. He didn't want to insult her or cause a diplomatic disaster. Viralan stood tall, watching him with a calm expression. "You wish to refuse me." Daniel hesitated. He wasn't sure how to say it without offending her, but he had to try. "I don't mean any disrespect," he said carefully, "but I didn't come here to get married. This was a mistake. I didn't understand your traditions, and I didn't know what the goblet meant. I'm just a guy from Earth. I'm not a noble. I'm not a warrior, and I don't belong in your world." Viralan was silent for a long moment. Then, to Daniel's surprise, she smiled. "I know." Daniel blinked. "Wait. What?" She stepped closer, her voice softer now. "I chose you because I knew you would refuse." That threw Daniel off completely. Come again." Viralan clasped her hands behind her back. "If I'd had chosen a Xalrai warrior, I would have been bound by tradition. Our laws would have forced me into a permanent bond, giving my family's power to my chosen mate." She exhaled. "I did not wish for that." Daniel stared at her. "So, you picked me because you knew I wouldn't want to stay." Viralan nodded. "You are an outsider. You are not bound by our customs in the same way. If you refuse me, I will have the right to declare my own path without being forced into a political marriage." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "So, I'm not just an accidental groom. I'm your way out." She tilted her head. "That is one way to see it." Daniel let out a breath. This was insane, but it also made sense. Still, there was a problem. "Okay, but won't this cause issues? Won't your people be angry?" Viralan's expression hardened slightly. "Some will be, but many will understand. The nobles will see that you won the trial, which proves you are a worthy bondmate. If you then choose to leave, it will be seen as my decision, not an insult." Daniel nodded slowly. "And what happens to you?" "I will be free," she said simply. Daniel thought for a moment. He hadn't planned for any of this, but now he had a chance to help her. She was stuck in a system that forced choices on her, just like he had been pushed into this mess without realizing it. Maybe, just maybe, they could both come out of this without ruining everything. He took a deep breath and offered his hand. "All right, Lady Viralan. Let's make this work, for both of us." She looked at his hand for a moment, then grasped it firmly. "Agreed." Before Daniel could feel any relief, a sudden explosion rocked the palace. The walls shook, the lights flickered, and an alarm blared through the corridors. Viralan's eyes narrowed. That was an attack. Daniel's instincts kicked in. Who would attack a royal ceremony? Viralan's expression darkened. Someone who does not want this alliance to happen. Daniel cursed under his breath. "Looks like we've got bigger problems than an accidental marriage." Viralan turned toward the door, her posture tense. "Come, human. If you truly wish to help, then fight with me." Daniel smirked despite himself. "You know what? This might actually be the craziest night of my life." Together, they ran toward the chaos. The palace shook again as another explosion rumbled through the corridors. Alarms blared, flashing red lights casting eerie shadows across the walls. Daniel Carter's heart pounded as he ran alongside Lady Viralan, their hurried footsteps echoing in the long hallway. "This is bad," Daniel muttered, glancing at the walls trembling around them. Viralan's violet eyes were sharp and focused. "It is worse than bad. An attack on the palace during a choosing ceremony is an open act of war." They turned a corner and nearly collided with Ambassador Zelkor and a squad of Xalrai royal guards. The ambassador's usually calm face was tense with urgency. "Lieutenant Carter." "Lady Viralan." He exhaled in relief. "Thank the stars you are safe." Daniel caught his breath. "What's happening?" Zelkor gestured toward the hallway behind him, where guards were sealing off parts of the palace. A faction of rogue Xalrai warriors launched an attack. They do not wish to see Lady Vireland's decision accepted. Daniel clenched his fists. So this is about the choosing ceremony. Vireland's expression darkened. Yes, some believe I should not have the right to choose my own path. They would rather see me forced into a traditional bond with someone like Korvek. As if summoned by his name, Korvek himself appeared, stepping out from behind the guards. His expression was serious, his muscles tense with battle readiness. Daniel's eyes narrowed. You wouldn't happen to be behind this, would you? Korvek glared at him. No, human. I do not approve of Lady Vireland's choice, but I am an honorable warrior. I do not attack my own people. He turned to Vireland. These rebels have betrayed the unity. Vireland nodded. Then we fight them together. A loud crash interrupted them. The far doors burst open, and a group of heavily armed rebels stormed in, their emerald skin glistening under the flashing alarms. They wore dark armor, their weapons glowing with crackling energy. One of them, a tall warrior with scars running across his face, stepped forward. Lady Vireland, surrender now, and no harm will come to you. Vireland stood tall, her voice unwavering. I will not. Daniel tensed. The rebels were ready for a fight. He didn't have a weapon, and his only advantage was his quick thinking. Korvek growled, stepping in front of Vireland. If you wish to take her, you will have to go through me. The lead rebel smirked. So be it. Then, chaos erupted. The rebels charged. The royal guards met them head-on, energy blades clashing, sparks flying. The corridor became a battlefield. Korvek roared, engaging the rebel leader in combat. The two warriors exchanged heavy blows, their strikes shaking the walls. Daniel, unarmed, had to think fast. He spotted a fallen guard's stunned baton on the ground. Without hesitation, he dived for it, rolling just as a rebel swung a glowing blade at him. Gripping the baton tightly, Daniel ducked under another strike and jabbed the weapon into the rebel's side. A surge of energy crackled through the attacker's body, sending him crashing to the floor. One down. Vireland moved gracefully, using a pair of short energy daggers to dodge and counter her opponents. She was faster than the rebels, her strikes precise. Daniel turned just in time to see another rebel rushing toward Vireland from behind. Look out, he shouted. Without thinking, Daniel threw his baton. It spun through the air and hit the rebel's hand, knocking his weapon aside. Vireland reacted instantly, twisting and delivering a sharp kick that sent the rebel flying into the wall. She turned to Daniel, her expression impressed. You fight well, human. Daniel smirked. I try. But the fight wasn't over. The rebels were pushing forward, their numbers overwhelming the royal guards. Korvek, still locked in combat with the leader, growled in frustration. We cannot hold them forever. Zelkor pressed his comm device. We need reinforcements now. A voice crackled through the communicator. Emergency lockdown in progress. You must reach the royal chamber. We can protect you there. Vireland nodded. We need to fall back. Korvek snarled but agreed. Fine. But we do not run. We fight our way there. Daniel gritted his teeth. This wasn't what he signed up for, but he wasn't going to let these rebels win. Let's move, he said. Together, they pushed forward, fighting through the corridors. The palace walls shook again as another explosion rocked the structure. Fires erupted from damaged panels, smoke filling the air. Daniel fought instinctively, dodging and countering, using whatever he could find. Stun batons, fallen weapons, even a broken chair. Korvek tore through enemies with sheer strength. Vireland was a whirlwind of precise strikes. Finally, they reached the royal chamber, its grand doors looming ahead. Guards inside were already sealing it, providing cover fire. Get inside, Zelkor shouted. Daniel grabbed Vireland's arm, pulling her forward as a rebel fired a blast toward them. The energy bolt narrowly missed, scorching the floor. They rushed through the doors, and the guards slammed them shut behind them. For a moment, There was silence. Daniel exhaled, his body aching from the fight. Well, that was fun. Veralan shook her head but smiled slightly. You are a strange human, Daniel Carter. Zelkor stepped forward, his expression grim. The rebels will not stop. They will break through eventually. Korvac folded his arms. Then we make our stand here. Daniel looked around the chamber, thinking. They couldn't just sit and wait for the rebels to breach the doors. We need a plan, he said. Something they won't expect. Viralan's eyes gleamed. Then let us outthink them. Daniel smirked. Now they were talking. The fight wasn't over, but neither was he. The royal chamber was silent except for the heavy breathing of the warriors inside. Daniel Carter leaned against a pillar, catching his breath. Outside, the rebels were regrouping, preparing for another assault on the sealed doors. Viralan stood beside him, her violet eyes sharp with focus. Korvac paced near the entrance, his muscles tense like a predator ready to strike. Ambassador Zelkor was speaking rapidly into his communicator, trying to call for more reinforcements. Daniel wiped sweat from his forehead. This wasn't looking good. The rebels were strong, well-armed, and determined. If they managed to breach the doors, there would be nowhere left to run. We can't stay here forever, Daniel muttered. Korvac grunted. Then let us open the doors and fight. Viralan shook her head. That would be foolish. They outnumber us. Daniel crossed his arms. Then we need a plan. Something unexpected. Zelkor turned away from his communicator, looking frustrated. The palace defense systems are damaged from the explosions. We are on our own for now. Daniel took a deep breath. All right. Think, Carter. Think. Then an idea hit him. He turned to Viralan. How much do these rebels know about human battle tactics? Viralan raised an eyebrow. Very little. Most Salrai warriors believe humans are physically weak. Daniel grinned. Good, then they won't see this coming. He walked to the center of the room, getting everyone's attention. All right, listen up. We can't just wait for them to blast through the doors. But if we make them think they've already won, we can turn this fight around. Korvac folded his arms. Explain. Daniel gestured toward the doors. We let them in. The room fell silent. Everyone stared at him. Zelkor frowned. That is madness. Viralan tilted her head, considering. Unless we control the way they enter. Daniel nodded. Exactly. We make them think they've caught us by surprise. But in reality, we set a trap. Korvac growled, but there was a hint of approval in his expression. A deceptive strategy. It is not the Stalrai way. Daniel smirked. It's the human way. Viralan stepped forward. What do you suggest? The plan. Daniel quickly laid out the strategy. The guards would act like they were abandoning their posts, making it seem like the room was only lightly defended. Zelkor would fake a desperate distress call, tricking the rebels into thinking the leadership was panicking. When the rebels forced the doors open, they would rush inside, expecting an easy victory. But instead of scared nobles, they would walk into a coordinated ambush. Viralan, Korvac, and the strongest warriors would be hidden in the shadows, striking from unexpected angles. Meanwhile, Daniel and a few others would create distractions to keep the rebels confused. Daniel looked at the group. If we pull this off, we can take them down before they realize what's happening. There was a moment of silence. Then Viralan smiled. It is risky, but it might work. Korvac grunted. It is a clever plan. I approve. Zelkor sighed. I still think it is madness, but we have no better options. Daniel clapped his hands. Great. Let's set the stage. The ambush. Everyone took their positions. The guards moved back, making it seem like they were retreating. Zelkor sent a fake distress signal, his voice shaking just enough to sound convincing. Then they waited. Minutes later, the heavy doors shook as the rebels tried to break through. Boom! The first explosion weakened the structure. Boom! The second one forced the doors open. The rebels rushed in, weapons drawn, expecting a room full of terrified nobles. Instead, they found darkness. The lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the chamber. The guards had vanished from sight. The lead rebel hesitated. Something is wrong. That was when the ambush began. Viralan struck first, her energy daggers flashing as she took down 2 rebels before they could react. Korvac roared, slamming into another rebel with bone-crushing force. Daniel moved fast, using his smaller size to dodge attacks and strike weak points. The rebels, caught off guard, tried to fight back, but they were disorganized. They had expected an easy victory, not a trap. One by one, they fell. A rebel charged at Daniel, swinging a blade. Daniel ducked, grabbed a fallen baton, and jabbed it into the attacker's ribs. The stun charge sent the rebel crashing to the floor. Across the room, Viralan and Korvac worked together, cutting through the enemy ranks with perfect coordination. Zelkor and the remaining guards sealed off the entrance, preventing reinforcements from arriving. Within minutes, the battle was over. The remaining rebels surrendered, dropping their weapons. Daniel exhaled, wiping sweat from his forehead. Well, that actually worked. Viralan smiled at him. You are full of surprises, human. Korvac crossed his arms, looking at Daniel with newfound respect. You fight with cunning, a rare quality. Zelkor sighed in relief. The palace is secure, for now. Daniel looked at Viralan. So, what happens next? Viralan's expression turned serious. The rebel leaders are still out there. This was only the beginning. Daniel chuckled dryly. Of course it was. Korvac smirked. Do you regret becoming the accidental groom now, human? Daniel laughed. Oh, absolutely. But I think I'm stuck with you guys now. Viralan nodded. Good, because the real battle is yet to come. Daniel took a deep breath. He had survived this fight. But something told him things were about to get even more dangerous. The dust settled in the royal chamber. The bodies of stunned and defeated rebels lay scattered across the floor, while the remaining survivors knelt, their hands raised in surrender. The battle was over. For now. Daniel Carter leaned against a pillar, breathing heavily. His muscles ached from the fight, and sweat dripped down his forehead. He had seen combat before, but nothing like this. Fighting in a diplomatic palace on an alien world had never been part of his plan. Viralan stood beside him, her twin energy daggers still glowing faintly. Her violet eyes swept across the battlefield, sharp and focused. We won this round, she murmured. But it is not over. Korvac crossed his arms, his massive form looming near the captured rebels. Agreed. Their leader is still out there. He turned to Ambassador Zelkor. We must interrogate them. Find out their next move. Zelkor, still catching his breath, nodded. The royal guards will handle them. But we must also focus on defense. The rebels will not stop until they achieve their goal. Daniel frowned. And what exactly is their goal? They tried to stop the choosing ceremony. But it's more than that, isn't it? Viralan exhaled. Yes, they believe our society should return to the old ways, where the strongest warriors alone determined leadership and alliances. They see my right to choose as a threat to their traditions. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. So they're extremists. Korvac grunted. Fools, more like. He pointed to the captured rebels. Tell us where your leader is hiding, and you may yet live. The tallest of the captured rebels, still breathing heavily, chuckled darkly. You think you have won. His emerald skin glowed faintly under the chamber lights. This was never about the choosing ceremony. Daniel narrowed his eyes. Then what was it about? The rebel's smile widened. It was about the diversion. A cold chill ran down Daniel's spine. Viralan tensed. What do you mean? Before the rebel could answer, a new alarm blared through the palace. Zelkor's communicator flashed red, and a panicked voice came through. Ambassador, The power core. Someone has sabotaged the palace power core. Daniel's eyes widened. Sabotage. As in, an explosion is imminent. The voice interrupted. A heavy silence filled the room. Then, everything descended into chaos. The race against time. Zelkor snapped into action, barking orders at the guards. Secure the prisoners and evacuate the lower levels. Korvek's fists tightened. If the power core detonates, the entire palace will be destroyed. Viralan turned to Daniel, urgency in her voice. We must stop the detonation. Daniel didn't hesitate. Then let's move. The group rushed out of the chamber, sprinting down the long corridors as the alarms screamed around them. The palace was already in a state of panic. Guards evacuating civilians, flames flickering from earlier explosions. As they neared the power core chamber, the heat in the air grew intense. The energy core was a massive structure, its glowing center pulsating like a beating heart. And now, it was unstable. A group of rebels stood guarding the control panel, their weapons drawn. One of them, a tall warrior with a deep scar across his face, sneered at them. You're too late, he said. The countdown has begun. The palace will fall, and the old ways will return. Daniel exhaled sharply. Man, you guys really don't know when to quit. Korvek drew his blade. Then we will make them quit. The final battle. The rebels charged forward. Korvek met them head-on, his strength overwhelming them. Viralan moved like lightning, striking with precision and speed. Daniel wasn't a warrior like them, but he had his own strengths. He ducked under a rebel's swing, grabbed a fallen weapon, and jabbed it into his attacker's ribs. The impact sent the rebel staggering backward, giving Daniel an opening to knock him out cold. But they were running out of time. The power core's glow intensified, its energy building toward a catastrophic explosion. Zelkor shouted from the control panel, I need access to the override. But it's locked. Daniel scanned the panel. His military training kicked in. He had seen similar systems before. The rebels must have encrypted it, but there was always a backdoor. He quickly moved beside Zelkor, fingers flying over the controls. There's always an emergency failsafe, he muttered. Come on, show yourself. The screen flashed red. The countdown ticked closer. 5 minutes. Viralan shouted over the chaos. Daniel, whatever you're doing, do it faster. Daniel gritted his teeth, his mind racing. Then he found it, a manual bypass hidden in the system. Got you, he whispered. With a final press of a button, the override activated. The countdown froze at 01. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, the energy core stabilized, its dangerous glow fading. They had stopped the explosion. The aftermath. The remaining rebels collapsed in defeat, their leader glaring at Daniel with pure hatred. This is not over. Daniel smirked. Yeah. Well, it is for today. Viralan stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. The old ways are gone. It is time for the future. Korvek grunted. And you will answer for your crimes. As guards rushed in to secure the remaining rebels, Daniel finally allowed himself to breathe. Viralan turned to him, a small smile on her lips. You saved the palace. Daniel chuckled, shaking his head. Not alone. We all did. Korvek nodded in approval. Perhaps you are not as weak as I once thought. Human. Daniel grinned. Thanks, big guy. That almost sounded like a compliment. Zelkor adjusted his robes. The choosing ceremony was interrupted, but Lady Viralan, your decision remains. Viralan's eyes met Daniel's. There was something undeniable in her expression. And in that moment, Daniel realized, this was far from over. This was only the beginning. The palace was still standing, but the echoes of battle remained. Smoke drifted through the corridors, and guards rushed to secure the last of the rebels. The energy core hummed steadily once again, its danger averted. For now, at least, the crisis was over. Daniel Carter leaned against a wall, taking a deep breath. His body ached from the fight, and exhaustion was beginning to settle in. But even through the tiredness, one thought kept running through his mind. What happens now? Violet stood beside him, her violet eyes studying the damage around them. Her expression was calm, but Daniel could see something deeper, something troubled. Korvac approached, his massive arms crossed. The rebels have been defeated, but they will return. Zelkor, brushing dust from his robes, nodded. Indeed, their leader remains in hiding. The battle for the future of the Xalrai is not yet finished. Daniel sighed. Great, just when I thought I could finally sit down. Violet turned to him. There is still one matter left unresolved. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Oh, what's that? She hesitated for only a moment before she spoke. The choosing ceremony. Silence fell between them. The final choice. The attack had interrupted the ceremony before Virilan had made her official selection, and even after everything that had happened, after the fighting and near-death experiences, that moment had finally arrived. Zelkor adjusted his robe. Lady Virilan, as is tradition, you must make your decision. Will you proceed with the original candidates, or do you choose another? Daniel's stomach tightened. He suddenly felt very, very aware of the way Virilan was looking at him. Korvac let out a deep chuckle. I think we all know the answer. Virilan ignored him and stepped forward. Her gaze locked onto Daniel's. There was no hesitation in her expression now, only certainty. Daniel Carter, she said, her voice steady. Will you stand beside me? The air seemed to grow still. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest. He had known this might happen. He wasn't blind. He had felt the growing connection between them. But now that the moment was here, the weight of it was heavier than he expected. Virilan, he ran a hand through his hair. I don't know if I'm the right guy for this. Virilan tilted her head. You saved my people. You fought when you had no reason to. You stood by my side, even when you had every reason to run. Daniel hesitated. But this is your world. Your culture. I don't belong here. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Perhaps that is why you are exactly who I need. Korvac grunted. This is ridiculous. Just accept, human. We have all seen it. You are already part of this. Zelkor sighed. The council will not approve easily. A human chosen as the mate of a Xalrai noble. It has never happened before. Daniel let out a breath. Right, because what this situation needs is even more politics. Virilan smirked slightly. Would you expect anything else? Daniel looked at her. He thought about everything. How far he had come, the battles they had fought, the strange bond they had formed. And then, deep inside, he realized the truth. He didn't want to leave. Somehow, this alien world had become his fight too. He met Virilan's gaze. All right, if you really want me in this, then I'm in. Virilan's smile widened. Korvac laughed loudly. Finally, the human understands. Zelkor shook his head. This will change the course of history. Daniel shrugged. Yeah, well, I guess history could use a few surprises. A new beginning. The ceremony was completed that evening, under the grand sky of the Xalrai homeworld. The council was divided, some outraged, some curious, and others simply stunned. But none could deny the truth. Virilan had made her choice, and Daniel Carter, the human who had arrived by accident, had become part of something greater than himself. As he stood beside Virilan, looking out over the gathered Xalrai, he felt the weight of the future pressing down on him. This wasn't just a diplomatic arrangement anymore. This was his new life. Virilan glanced at him, amusement flickering in her eyes. Regrets. Daniel exhaled. Ask me again in a week. She chuckled. I will. The ceremony ended with a vow, not just between two individuals, but between two species. And as Daniel looked at the stars above, he couldn't help but wonder, What comes next? One thing was certain. His adventure was far from over.